Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Raymond Johnson, and today we are going to be talking about the four keys to building great teams and how to keep them from destroying themselves. So, if you can hear me, do me a favor and go ahead and put a number one in the chat. Put a one in the chat so I can make sure that you can hear me and that I can communicate with you. We are live. We're streaming on LinkedIn as well as YouTube. So if you can hear me, go ahead and put a number one in the chat. Let's go ahead and, all right, I see you. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into our time together. We've got a lot of ground that we're going to be covering for today. And we want to make sure that we cover everything that we said that we're going to cover. As we mentioned today, we're focusing on the four keys to building your team and how to keep them from destroying themselves. How do they do that? How do they avoid destroying themselves? Well, we want to talk about how to keep them from developing a poor culture or low employee engagement, even team performance issues we're trying to address, and problems with coworkers. These are all things that we've all had to deal with at one point or another. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. So without further ado, let's go ahead, put your camera here. Here we go. And we're talking about, let's go ahead and change that. There we go. Bam, there we go. All right. And we're talking about the four keys to building great teams. So let's go ahead and get to it. First of all, make sure that what you do is you go ahead and on LinkedIn, follow Savvy CEO. Please follow Savvy CEO for more Savvy CEO sense. Make sure that you like and that you share this content on LinkedIn. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. And guess what? We also want you to comment. If you have a question that comes up throughout the time that we're here together, just put a Q in front of your question so we can go ahead and we can answer your questions. All right. So let's see what we have next. Our four keys. Key number one is composition. We want to make sure that you determine how you want your team to naturally show up. In other words, when we talk about how to build your team and to make them a great team, the single most important thing that I think that you need to realize, and most people don't realize, is that you have the power. You have the power to figure out how you want them to show up. Determine how you want your team to naturally show up. And I always use the DISC analysis for this, the DISC index, simply because the DISC index determines or shows how we prefer to behave. It measures 48 behavioral traits, and those 48 behavioral traits show how people feel to be most comfortable in their natural or their authentic selves. And so when you look at the world, when you look at all of the people who have been surveyed, did you know that 30% of the people who have been surveyed are either considered to be an I, an I or an S? In other words, what this means is that they're either interactive or they're stabilizers. And we're going to look more at these, but they're interactive or they're stabilizers. And only 12% are considered to be Ds and 28% are considered to be Cs. So when you look at your team, you want to determine how do you want them to show up? Which one of these are you most interested in, right? Well, I'm glad you asked. When we think about that, we know that the D is the decision makers. Those are the decisive doers. They're the ones who deal with problems and they like to get results, right? They look for solutions. Then you have the I. The I is the interactive innovator. This is the person that is the socializer, the person, the people person. And then you've got the secret stabilizer, as I call them, because they're the workers. They're the secret geniuses that know how to get things done. And they're more concerned with pacing things in their environment. And they want to make sure they get things right. So they like to ask questions how. They like to ask how questions. You're going to see that come up a little bit later on. In addition to that, there is also the cautious perfectionist. This is the person that is the planner. This is the person that is all about getting it right. And so we're going to jump into all of these, but I want you to realize Everybody has some D in them, or some I, or some S, or some C. Different people have different amounts. And when we say you want to determine how your team shows up, what we're saying is you want to determine, do you need more interactive people on your team? Do you need more cautious or stabilizers? Do you need more decisive problem solvers on your team? What do you actually need? And when you decide what you need, you know what to look for. Now, what I need to show you is that you don't want to lean only on the disc. The disc has another tool. There's another tool that actually doesn't have another tool, but there's another tool that goes well with the disc that helps you to understand why people do what they do. And that is important when we get to employee engagement, right? So we're deciding how we want our people to show up. And when we do that, we look at these 48 behavioral traits, and we're not going to go through all of them. But as you can see, there are 12 traits that are under each and every single one of these columns. So you've got the D, which is the decisive person, the I, the S, and the C. So there are all these different traits that are being measured. And when you have a number on your score, that corresponds to a particular trait. And all of the traits within that area are dominant to that individual, right? All those that are not are not. But when you have the DISC index, you can determine who it is that you want on your team. You can determine how it is that you want them to show up. Now, this is just a tip of the iceberg. We have so much more ground to cover that we're not going to be able to cover tonight. But we can go through the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities. We can go through the threats even of each and every one of these. And we can show you what their superpowers are. We can show you what they're strong at. And we can show you where they need help with and where they're not their strongest. But these 48 behavioral traits are what we start with. So when we talk about how to build your team and keep it from destroying itself, keep it from creating a poor culture, keep it from low employee engagement, keep it from behavioral problems and problems with teammates. When we talk about creating this type of team, we're talking about putting people in the right categories. Now, remember, we're talking about this right here. We're talking about putting them in the right category. So we're talking about the decisive doer, interactive person, the stabilizer person, and the cautious person. We've got to put them in the right combination. So when we do that, here's what it looks like. Now, you're going to have on this access, you're going to have several things that you got to consider. Number one, if you need a team and your team is a complementary team of task and issue-oriented individuals, or maybe you have a team that is more relation-oriented. Perhaps you have a team that is a little bit more reserved and introverted or passive. Or on the right-hand side, maybe you put together a team that is extrovert and more of an active implementer, right? You can have these 4 different types of teams, or you can have a team that just has all of these, right? So here's what we're saying. In other words, when you have a decisive person and an interactive person, that gives you an extrovert, active implementer team. Now that's a game changer because this means your managers. This is talking about people who are decisive decision makers for the organization. We're talking about having people who know how to implement something. We're talking about a group of people that know how to make the hard decisions, right? And in this particular team, because of the interactive person, we're talking about someone who is combined with the team, and their whole purpose of being combined with this team is to help build the relationship through the process, right? But then you have not only that, you've got the stabilizing and the interactive team. This stabilizer and interactive team is the more relation oriented. So if you have a team that you need to purely develop relationships, then you need, guess what? A stabilizer and interactive individual or individuals. And then lastly, when we look at is your cautious. You've got your cautious and your stabilizer, which is your introvert or your passive or your reserved team, or you've got your cautious and your decisive, which is more of your task and issue-oriented team. So you've got all these different combinations of your team, and you've decided how you want them to show up. You know what type of team you need or that you are trying to develop. You envision it, but you don't know what to do in order to keep them from destroying themselves, from creating that poor culture, or the infighting among the team members and lack of cohesion, or the low employee engagement. You don't know what to do. So what the best thing that you can do is make sure that when you are working with them, that you avoid challenging combinations. When you avoid these challenging combinations, you're able to get work done better. Now, is it possible to put these different groups together, these different people together, and make it work? Yes, it's possible, but it's nearly impossible. It's possible, but it's very difficult to do. And so the best thing to do is to avoid those types of combinations depending on what your team is in the first place. So in other words, avoid the cautious and the interactive combination for a team on those tasks that deal with doing things the right way, that deal with following the rules. Why? Because your cautious individual is more concerned with procedures and with protocols. Your interactive person is not. Your interactive person is more interested in relationships. They want to know who. They want to know who. But when you have your decisive and your stabilizers, you don't want to put them together either, because why? The decisive is all about getting it done. Speed is synonymous with efficiency, but not so with the stabilizer. The stabilizer is very methodical and they take their time. And that will frustrate the hair out of the head of the decisive individual. They'll go crazy because they want to get it done. But the stabilizer wants to take their time, and they're going to ask, how do I do this? A million times just to be sure. Meanwhile, the stabilizer is used to, I'm sorry, the decisive is used to figuring it out as they go. So you want to go ahead and build your team, but you want to avoid these diagonal combinations, right? Now, let's look at our second key. Our second key is dealing with communication. Now, according to nearly 2,000 employees that were surveyed, 63% of the people that were surveyed considered that they had a bad manager, and they considered leaving their company within the next 12 months simply because of a bad manager, right? But look at this. The number one skill employees felt that their managers lacked was communication. Communication. So in 12 months, you could lose 63% of your employees simply because of a bad manager who can't communicate well. So what we want to do is we want to talk about how is it that you can communicate in order to close that gap. Now, here's what the Gallup report said. It said, knowing how to communicate is an effective means of hugely lifting employee engagement. Now, this is interesting because look, when we look at this here, this was done in 2021, right? By People Management Report. But then in 2020, the year before that, Gallup report said the exact same thing. In fact, they said that it hugely lifts employee engagement. So communication is not something that you want to underestimate. It's something that you don't want to assume that you are good at and the greatest at. You want to make sure that you go ahead and you learn how to effectively communicate. So how is it that we can effectively communicate? And remember, we're focusing right now on the DIS, the people who are primarily dominant as D's or as I's or as S's or as a C. They're dominant in one of these areas, and there's gonna be a certain way that they prefer communication to take place. So when you have your D, know that your D is more interested in problems and decisions. They want to make sure that they know how to solve problems and decisions. So guess what they're going to do? They want to know what. So when you're communicating with your decisive coworker, your decisive boss, who usually the D's are usually in positions of authority, when you're communicating with them, make sure that you talk about what when you're dealing with the problem and what when you're dealing with the facts, and do it quickly. And we're going to come to a cheat sheet in a minute, but here are the four primary questions you need to be aware of. You need to know what when you're dealing with a D. You need to know who when you're dealing with an I. In fact, what that I person wants, what they're looking for is they're more interested in people. and opinions. So when you communicate with them and you're dealing with people or opinions, make sure that you focus on the on who, and your who relates to that. When you're talking about how is simply the essence way of saying, how do we do this? How do we pace ourselves and our environment? And so what you need to do is always explain what needs to be done. And when you explain what needs to be done, make sure that you use how terms, terms that show them how to do it first, second, and third. And when you do that, they're able to pace their environment and get things done the right way, because that's what they're mostly concerned about. And then when you deal with the why, the C, they want to know about procedures and protocols. So it's all about why. Why? Explain to them why. In fact, I bet you will run out of why answers because they thirst for why. But look, this is what you want on your team. When you decide how you want them to show up, you now know what their strengths are. And now, because you know what their strengths are, you know how to help them get their strengths instead of how to force them to operate outside of their strengths. Now, a report that I read recently was saying that there are people who who need to fill positions that are not in their natural order of gifting. And so what people need is they need coaching. And so if you're going to operate outside of your gifts, you need coaching. You need coaching to help you so you can build that great team. Now here's the cheat sheet. Remember, we've got the D, we've got the I, we've got the S, and we've got the C, right? We've got all of these right here. So when we have that, here's the cheat sheet. All right, here we go. First, explain what with facts. Use facts. Get to the point when you're dealing with your D. Hurry up, keep it short, and know that business is business. Don't ask them to do something when they're in the zone, because they're trying to focus on getting things done. They're not interested in other things. They want to get the task done, and they want results. So let them do that. But then there's the I. The I, you got to be nice when you talk to them. You got to make sure that you're positive, that you're diplomatic, that you create structure, because there's one of the weaknesses of the I. You've got to help them to create structure, and then you want to make sure that you think of the big picture. Think of the big picture when you're dealing with the I, because the I is innovative. The I is a natural big picture thinker, and you want to make sure that you speak their language. When you're dealing with the S, you want to make sure that you show that you care, that you listen to them, that you encourage them, and make sure that you're patient and explain how. That goes to what we just said earlier. And be considerate. Be considerate, because guess what? They don't think like you think. They don't fear the things that you fear. They're not concerned about, they're concerned about other things than what you normally would be concerned about. So instead of coming down on them, build them up. Be patient, listen, and actually be genuine. Show that you care and explain how. Be considerate. And I guarantee you will have a loyal teammate forever. Now, when we look at the C, you've got to make sure that when you deal with them, there's no corners you can cut. Number one, be prepared. Number two, be detailed. And three, avoid criticizing, right? They can be very critical, very, very critical, because it's all about right and wrong to them. And they don't understand that it comes across as criticizing. So make sure that when you're communicating with them, you avoid criticizing, and that you help them to see that what is happening is not a right or wrong issue. It's all about how it comes across. You know, there's a saying that says you can be wrong at the top of your voice. You can be wrong at the top of your voice. So make sure that what you say is said correctly, and then show you appreciate them and help them to take action. Why do we say that? Because they will analyze things forever and ever and ever to get it right. And sometimes you got to just act. You got to pull the trigger. You got to act. All right. Third key. We only have 4 keys. We're doing good. Third key is show that you care. Now, this one is a big one. This is a big one. So you're going to want to make sure you pay close attention to this one. This one here, number 3, know that your team's values are going to help you to align them and reduce burnout, to increase drive, to create superior individual team performance. And so make sure that when you're aligning their values, that you align their values with what they do in order to reduce burnout, increase drive, and create superior individual team performance. Okay. Now, when we talk about that, let's look at a little bit closer in talking about employee engagement. Now, I like this because everything that I've read about employee engagement, all the research, all of the reviewed articles, everything that I can just get my hands on, there are many definitions that emphasize some sort of aspect of the employee's actions. And they always focus on the employee's commitment to the organization, or the positive behaviors that are demonstrated by those employees who are engaged. So it's always about commitment and positive behaviors of the model employee, so to speak. And so when we look at that, when we consider that, we've got to consider, well, what is the problem of low employee engagement? We know what employee engagement is, but what is the challenge that we're facing? Well, the Engagement Institute in 2020 said 85% of employees are not engaged in the workplace. Can you imagine that? I can imagine that. I've met some of them who are not engaged in the workplace. And look at this one. Low employee engagement costs companies $450 to $500 billion a year. Can you imagine that? $450 to $500 billion a year. That is a lot. And so when we deal with employee engagement, and more important, low employee engagement, we've got some major challenges that we have to face. So let's look at the cause of low employee engagement. What is the cause? All right. When we look at the cause, let's look at two things to consider. Number one, employees don't feel valued by their manager. They don't feel a sense of belonging to the organization. And don't miss those two words. There's a lack of value and belonging. These aren't my words. This is coming from McKinsey and Company last year in 2020's report, right? They don't feel valued or that they belong to the organization. All right. Employers feel that transactional factors such as compensation are the problem. So on one hand, you've got employees who don't feel valued and they don't feel like they belong. And on the other hand, you have employers who don't even see that that's an issue, and they're focusing on transactional factors like compensation, right? Now, compensation is always good, but what is more important is actually feeling valued and a part of the organization, that you belong to the organization. So when you look at this research and you look at all of the data, you've got to realize that when passions are not connected to what employees do, the result is low employee engagement. They're not in line. So what we've got to do is we've got to align what the employee does with what their values are, okay? And so when you think about that, how do we actually get to the point where we can align the team's values? Remember, we have our team that we talked about. We see what their team is, right? We've got the same lineup here, but we've got to look at, and remember I told you earlier, we've got our disc, and we know how people prefer to show up. We know what their authenticity is. They're naturally a decisive problem solver, or they're naturally an interactive social individual. But what is the thing that motivates them? Let me tell you a quick story. I'm going to come back here and change my camera. So as I was over the holiday weekend, I went to turn on my car for some reason. I don't even know why. And it wouldn't start. It wouldn't even make a noise. So I had to have it towed today when the car dealer opened back up. And when I was talking to my insurance company, trying to get the car towed, they called back with a confirmation. And the lady on the phone was so nice. She was so nice. I could hear her smiling. She saw my area code on my phone, and she says, "How long have you been in that area? And you're from that area, so how long have you been here? You've moved. How do you like it?" Now we're talking about my car being towed, but this particular person wants to talk about, excuse me, where I'm from. How do I like the area? She even got to the point where she said, "Don't eat the barbecue here." She says the barbecue back home is better. I mean, she gave me restaurants to go to. She was a high interactive person. And she said something at the end of that whole conversation. We hadn't even talked about the car yet. She said, "Oh, well, I'm glad I could help you. Now let's go ahead and talk about the car." She went on to talk about the car. But here's the thing. Here was an interactive person. They are a person concerned with who. Remember, that's the yellow one. They're concerned with not only who, but they want to also share their opinions. They're interactive. She has a value to help people. That was her thing. She's all about helping people. So she felt that she did a good thing because she was helping me, someone who's moved out of town, who lives somewhere else. She helped me to adjust, and then she turned around and helped me with the transaction that we had to deal with. And it was a great transaction, great conversation, great individual. So what I'm saying is, when you have a clear idea of how you want your team to show up, and you go ahead and you build. Let me come back to our screen so you can see it. And you actually build your team, right? You've got these people and you build them, and you've combined them the way that they need to be combined. The next thing that you have to do is figure out what motivates them so they can stay engaged at work. Because if had I kept it purely transactional with her on the phone, it would not have been a good interaction in her mind. She wouldn't have felt like she actually helped, right? Now, so we're talking about these values, and when we look at these values, there's approximately 7 different values. And I want you, don't worry about memorizing them because we're going to go through them in 1 second. But when you look at the values, you need to realize that values are the same as motivators. Values are the same as what? They are the same as motivators. All right. So put it in the chat. I want you to put motivators. Values are the same as motivators. Put motivators in the chat. All right. If you don't feel like typing, put in M, the letter M. But the bottom line is, what a person's values are is what moves them. And when they have a high value, they run towards that activity. When they have a low value, they run away from it. Right? So let's go ahead and let's look at the 7 values that we have. There's the first value, aesthetic. Well, this is a drive for balance, harmony, and form. In other words, peace. This person just wants peace. That's how they get happiness. If they can do something and it gives them peace, they'll continue doing it. Then there's the economic. This is a drive for economic or practical returns. This person is not only or always thinking about money, but one of the things they need is they need a practical return. In other words, they need a result. Give them a result. If you don't give them a result, there's going to be problems, right? They want to go towards the things that give them a result. And then there's the individualistic, a drive to stand out as independent and unique. In other words, this person wants the freedom to be themselves. Let me be who I am. And then there's number 4, the political. This is a drive to be in control of themselves or others, or to have influence. This is the boss. This is the person that wants to be the team lead. This is the person that wants to be the head of the project. This is political right here. Now, this is interesting. You've got some people who are in positions who have a very low political. They may have the disc areas, but they have a low political, so therefore they don't really want to be in charge. They've got the title. They've got everything that comes with it except for the drive to handle their position, right? To be in control, to deal with the employees that aren't doing right. They just want to help people. So now, because their value is that they just want to help people, right? We haven't gotten to help. That's the next one. Here it is. Altruist, a drive for humanitarian efforts or to help others altruistically. So they don't have a high political. They are high altruists. They just want to help people. They're going to have a difficult time dealing with other employees that are coming up short in areas that they don't need to be, right? So the fact that there may be a driving problem solver may not necessarily be enough if they don't have the right values that match their behaviors. Why are they a problem solver? Why are they looking for those results? Well, in this case, maybe you've got a person who's an altruist. They want to help others. So you see, these 2 different tools that we have, this values tools and the disc, go hand in hand and show us why people do what they do. And then not only that, we've got the altruist, but number 6, we've got the regulatory. That's a drive to establish order, routine, and structure. This is good. You need somebody like this on your team who can help the systems fall in place. And then lastly, there's number 7, the theoretical. This is a person that has a drive for knowledge, learning, and understanding. Okay, so those are the three keys. We've got one more key. This is the last key, and this is the key which is called community. Number 4, you need to, as a leader in your industry, you need to quantifiably measure and develop your team's 6 areas of attributes. I'm going to tell you what those attributes are in 1 second. But these attributes are going to help your team to develop, foster, create a community of good decision makers. Now, there are people on my team that fit very well into this area because they've grown. But there's still people who are still growing, and they have really great traits, but when it comes to their 6 areas of attributes, there's a lot of work that we have to do. And so when you quantifiably measure and develop these 6 areas, you then know where you need to develop training or where you need to locate training to actually help people in those areas, right? So let's go ahead and let's look at these 6 areas of attributes so we can create that community of good decision makers. It's all about decisions. How do you do it? So when we talk about decision making, there's only 2 categories, right? And this is good. I did one of my masters in organizational leadership, where we deal with a lot of decision making. But I found out through research that there's got to be more to it than this. There's so many theories. And as I as I researched, I found that there are only 2 categories of decision making. There is the external decision making, and then there's the internal. But let's go ahead and look at the external decision making. When we talk about both, there are 3 things that you've got to be concerned about. Number 1, that there is clarity that you have to think of. So when a person scores on this 3rd assessment, this 3rd questionnaire that we're talking about that helps us to build our teams, we're looking at how clear are they in that area. So you see the background bars. You may have low bars on the left, these blue ones on the left, or you may have high bars, and maybe you had bars near the bottom. That means they're just not clear, right? They don't quite see it as good, right? So high doesn't mean good and low doesn't mean bad. It just means clarity. How clear is it? So there's a score that you need to look at, the clarity. There's the order. In other words, are they first, second, third in this area of external decision making? Are they looking at this first area first? Are they looking at this next area third? Or they're looking at this next area second? How are they looking at it? And this is important because there is there was a book I was reading, and it was about this drug rehab company. And do you know that out of the drug rehab, they had low altruists. They weren't really concerned about helping people. They were more about systems. And when you looked at these 3 areas that we're about to focus on, they did not score high in any of these areas. So when it came to seeing the problem from that big perspective, when it came to actually doing it or having empathy, which is the first one that we're about to look at, they were low in empathy. So they're all about not helping people, but economic. They were all about making sure that they had the right system, and they were low on empathy. Well, that's bad for a drug rehab leader or leadership team. You need people who score differently. But when you have that particular type of people, you may need those people in a very different position, a different organization, because when it comes to empathy, you may not want someone who's empathetic when it comes to being over safety, right? If they're over safety in a manufacturing warehouse, they don't need to be empathetic. They need to make sure that people know how to be safe. They don't need to be worried about their feelings. All right? So we're looking at, with external and internal, we're looking at these 3 things. 1, clarity. 2, we're looking at order. How do they think about these things, in what order? And then number 3, we're looking at, are they biased? Are they over or under? Or are they balanced? So let's go ahead and take a quick look. So we got empathy, which we talked about, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. We talked about the second one, which is practical thinking. And practical thinking deals with solutions, right? Empathy deals with people and relationships. Practical thinking deals with solutions or doing. And then systems judgment, one of my favorites is strategy. That's that 30,000 foot view. 30,000 foot view. I can see everything that is possible in this situation that we can do. And I have got a strategy where I can help us to actually get it done, right? But guess what? The practical thinker says, well, I know how to do the work. I may not be able to see the solution, the big overview, but I know what I need to do in this situation. And then you've got the people who they know how to build relationships. So remember, we're talking about the order, the clarity, and the balance. Are they balanced in terms of the things that we're thinking about, or are they not? All right, so let's go ahead and let's look at empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. This is the people, the relationship. Are they high at this? Right? Give you some examples when we talk about empathy. Some examples dealing with understanding and attitude, or do they have a sensitivity towards others? Are they good at teamwork? Do they know how to develop others? Do they have great emotional intelligence? Are they free from prejudice? You need this in today's world with all the D&I talk that all the organizations are talking about. We need to make sure that we've got this empathy where it needs to be. Also, there is understanding and persuading others and gaining commitment. So with empathy, it is a very broad area, but we need to make sure that we score our team. We quantifiably look at their scores for empathy so we know how to address them. And then do they want personal connections? Do they want to keep it professional, or are they balanced? Are they balanced? All right. So that's empathy. Let's look at practical thinking. Practical thinking is looking at things from a results oriented perspective. This is the ability to process how to get results, and how things work. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at an example of that. When we talk about practical thinking and some of the examples, when we're dealing with tactics and solutions, we're talking about execution, speed of action, results oriented. We're talking about goal focusing. We're talking about attention to details. Are they confident in solving problems? Are they frustrated currently? Or are they balanced somewhere in the middle? This is important because we're talking about tactics and solutions. So if you've got employees that have a bad manager, like we talked about in that research that was done by McKinsey, where they had surveyed over 5,000 different individuals, and they consider that their manager is a poor communicator. Perhaps their manager is not only a poor communicator, but maybe there's something deeper, which is maybe they score lower and they don't have a very clear score when it comes to practical thinking. So they can't see the problem. They can't see how to do what needs to be done in order to help their team, right? Because remember, when we talk about this, we're talking about the hand, we're talking about solutions. We're talking about how to get things done in that result. So maybe they're good at seeing what the problem is, which is our next one, systems judgment, but maybe they don't know how to do it, right? And so we need to build our teams to have the type of atmosphere and culture and to reduce employee engagement. But if we don't actually quantifiably measure these things, we won't know. We'll be guessing, right? And so we want to make sure that we pay attention to that. They can be confident, as we said, currently frustrated, or they can be balanced. Now let's look at systems judgment. This is our third one. And remember, we said there are a total of 6, and then we're going to be done. Total of 6. This is dealing with the external decision-making process. Systems judgment is that big picture thinking, that 30,000 foot view, right? This is the person that knows how to create systems, establish processes. They're great at strategic thinking, and they do it in a natural way. So when you look at some of the examples of systems judgment, we're talking about strategic planning, theoretical problem and solving, seeing potential problems or creating complex systems, big picture thinking, establishing processes, proactive thinking, quality orientation, schematic thinking, working with complex ideas. And guess what? They can be so good at this, but they need structure to be their best. Or some may be good at this or not as good at it, but they're most effective when they're free. or maybe they're balanced. And guess what? You've got people on your team that need one of these three things. They're very high or not, or in the middle, and they either need structure, need freedom to have autonomy, or they're balanced. But guess what? You've got to measure it quantifiably. Don't guess. And then there's the last group of decision making, which is the internal decision making pattern. Now I want to go back. I want to make sure we're clear. We're talking about order, clarity, and bias. Let's go to this one right here. Let's switch it right here. Do your people think about empathy first, practical thinking first, or systems judgment first? Now, there's no wrong or right answer. Where the answer has meaning is when we look at the context of your organization. Are you an HR? Are you a vice president? Are you a CEO of a hospital? Are you a manager? Are you a practice manager? Who is it that you are, and where do you work? And the context of the people determines what is needed. Do they think about empathy first? Or are they only looking at systems? If you're in the medical field, you need to be high empathetic, right? But you also need to be systems oriented, systems judgment. But here's the part that's difficult for some, is that practical thinking, that how to do what we need to do in a way that works, in a way that keeps the people, right? So you got to think about that, because if you're a vice president and you're working in the wrong order of things, you're going to be frustrated, okay? So when we talk about the clarity, how do you score? How clear are you on that? How strong are you in that area? What order do you look at, or are you balanced or not? All right. So that's the external decision-making process. Whatever decisions you make based on these things in the environment, your decisions are going to be made or filtered through one of these three. Then we've got our last one, which we said, which is the internal decision-making pattern. Now, this one is a little bit more straightforward. When we talk about this one, we're talking about self-esteem. How does your team feel? How do your leaders feel about themselves? Do they feel overvalued or undervalued in relationship to the team? This is important, because remember what we said earlier. We said that people are not as engaged as they could be, simply because people feel that they don't have value by their managers, and they don't have a sense of belonging to the organization. And the employers, on the other hand, are more transactional in their assessment of everything. So when we talk about the internal decision-making patterns, the first thing that we need to look at, again, we're looking at clarity, we're looking at bias, we're looking at order. We want to look and we want to say, is a person feeling valued on the team, right? Second thing is role awareness. Are they confused about their role? With remote working, that's something to be considered, to think of. Do they know if their leader's identity comes from their title, from success, or from failure? Do they feel identified with their role, right? Do their identity come from winning or from losing? Or does their role make a difference in how you mentor them? All this matters. So when you can measure their role awareness, then you know what you need to do to keep them. You know what you need to do to build them, and you know what you need to do to safeguard them. And then there's the last one. The last one, we're about wrapped up here in a couple minutes, is self-direction. Self-direction. This is addresses how you clear your team. This addresses how clear your team is in their future role. How do they view the path that they have to take to get there? There are some companies that don't have a project management office, but if you're a part of a company that has a project management office, then self-direction is something you should be interested in, because it will show you how your employees feel about their future role. And if you find that they're not clear, meaning they have a lower score, or they're not as clear as you would prefer them to be, then you know what work you have to do to help them in developing programs that will help them to see their future role in your organization. All right. So those are the four keys that we have as we talk about how to build your team and how to make sure that we keep it from destroying itself, there are two things that I need you to do. I need you to go ahead and partner with us. Make sure, and we've already said, we want you to like, we want you to subscribe to this video. We want you to make sure that you share it and comment, right? We want you to do that. If you're on LinkedIn, follow Savvy CEO for more Savvy CEO sense. We meet every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, and we talk about the 4 keys in one way or another. But we want you to partner with us if you have any of these challenges where, like we said, over, 85% of the people who are employed are not engaged, where 450 to 500 billion dollars a year is spent on low employee engagement. If you've got a hard time finding talent, partner with us. We've got the measuring tools that are scientifically proven that it can actually help you to do this. And so partner with us. But not only do you want to partner with us, we have a course that we are creating. And a course that we are creating is going to be an awesome course. I'm going to go ahead and share with you here. It is the Savvy CEO Leadership Development Academy. And here are the things that you are going to get from this particular course, right? Now, this course is just now being created and built, but you're going to get an 8-week virtual group coaching session, and you're going to get all the recordings that go with it. In addition to that, let me move this. In addition to that, you're going to also get lifetime access to the Savvy CEO Leadership Development Academy, social media platform, and the group text messaging. You will get also lifetime access to the private Facebook community. And then you will get access to lifetime access, I should say, to the pre-recorded training materials and the strategies. Now, what comes along with all of this is our preferred coaching guide, which is the Advanced Insights. And it is a customized 73-page report that goes to you, that you receive, and it has a ton of information. A ton. It talks about your preferred work environment. It talks about your preferred way of communicating, meaning how you prefer people to communicate with you, how you prefer them to avoid in their communication with you. It talks about how you can be your natural self, your authentic natural self, and how to avoid from being stressed or burned out where you're not your authentic self. It talks about your values and how to match what you do with your values. It talks about the 6 areas of attributes that we just talked about, the external and the internal decision-making processes, and a whole lot more. But it's 73 pages, and you get all of that. We would meet on a weekly basis, once a week. How often did I say? Once a week. And it'll be an 8-week group coaching session. If you come in after the 8 weeks have started, we'll start you on that particular week. And then what we'll do is we'll make sure you have access to the recordings that took place beforehand so that you can make sure that you catch up with us. But this is how you can identify, you can build and protect your team from destruction. Now, we have a special that we're focusing on. Normally, what we do is this is a 70% off, because really it's going to be a $997 course, but there's an introductory fee that we have for only $297. Short, small comparison to what you get, but guess what? You get all of this simply by joining us. You can go to our website and you can go ahead and join up there. If you have not joined up and you're just watching this particular video, what you need to do is go to IamRaymondJohnson.com, this website that is right here. You want to go to that website and you want to make sure you go to the webinar tab. Go to the webinar tab and sign up for the webinar. Once you sign up, make sure you go to your email. And once you go to your email, you want to confirm the email. That is how you will get access to all of the recordings and everything. But you want to make sure that you sign up. You go to this website, go to the webinar tab, and then sign up for the webinar. Even though you're watching the webinar now, even though you're seeing the replay right now, you still can do that. But listen, you've got to make sure you do it, because next week, which is, let's see, the next week that is coming is July. Let me double check. The next week that is coming is going to be on July, and it's going to be July the 10th. That is on a Sunday. that is when this offer will no longer be available. We are only accepting 25 people for this quarter. And so you want to go ahead and get it while you can. Again, you're going to get all of these things and so much more in that particular report. And right now, as I mentioned, we do have an introductory investment fee for only $297. Normally, the course is going to retail for $997, but you get to get the introductory part for it as well. Let's go ahead and look at some testimonials, and then we'll go ahead and we'll be done. This one here is from Reggie Butler. He's the CEO, and he had three things that he wanted to do. He wanted to increase his ability, his capability to make decisions. He wanted to know how to communicate with his team so that he can make informed decisions effectively. And thirdly, he wanted to make sure that he built his team to ensure that they're in the right positions. And so here's what Reggie had to say. He said, as a newcomer CEO or a newer CEO coming from a sales background, as opposed to operations, Raymond was able to help me in a clear fashion to identify and give a name to my unique style. It's given me the direction I needed and cut time off my learning curve. And then you have Kurt Davis, who's a mechanical engineer. He did not like his job. He came to me and he told me, he says he didn't like his job. He's thankful for a job, but he really didn't see his purpose in his career. He's always loved what he's done, but he was just totally and entirely disconnected, and he was not sure about the future of his career. And so what he said is, he said, Raymond offered a holistic approach, and I believe that it is a model that has benefited me and making progress towards my career objectives. His program has allowed me to grow in regards to personal development. Raymond's ability to engage, extract strengths, and create actionable steps in overcoming challenges all highlight his commitment to success. I would highly recommend Raymond to anyone seeking to climb higher in search of living life on purpose. That's from Kurt, mechanical engineer. And then we had Valerie. Valerie said there were three things she needed, and Valerie needed to communicate effectively with her team. She was a very direct person. She thought she was a very clear person, but when she looked a little bit closer, she said she needed to communicate effectively with her team. Now, I have to admire anyone who thinks one thing and then takes a self-assessment and they realize they need to grow because of the people that are around them. So she said she needed to communicate effectively with her team. She needed to know how to communicate in a way that maximizes the results. She didn't want to sacrifice the results, and she wanted to make sure that she was better with her strengths or her superpowers. And so with all of those three things, she said, with the information you shared, and the action steps you gave, I know that my personal and professional life is destined for greatness. You have my humblest appreciation. Thank you. Now, look, this is important because when you think about this, what you learn in this course, in this Leadership Academy, is you not only learn how to be a better employee, but this stuff affects you in your personal life. And Valerie is a testament. She says she knows that her personal and her professional life is destined for greatness. And so we want to go ahead and make sure that what we do is we give you this information right here so you can go ahead and you can get this information. Again, how do you get this information? Go to the website. Go to the website. When you go to the website right here, go to this website, you go ahead and click on webinar. Click on webinar and sign up for the webinar. Even though you're watching it, even though you're watching it on LinkedIn, even though you're watching it on YouTube, even though you're in the webinar with me while we're doing this, make sure you go ahead and you sign up for it. If you've already signed up for it, then you will have access to the information. All you need to do is make sure you go to that website, and when you go to that website, you'll get all of this and then more. All right, my name is Raymond Johnson. This has been 4 keys to building great teams and how to keep them from destroying themselves by developing poor cultures, by communicating ineffectively, by having infighting and problems with the team. We want to go ahead and encourage you to go to our website. The offer is only going to last until Sunday. Be blessed. Have a wonderful and an awesome-tastic evening. Peace.